Hello, I'm coming to you live from the woods behind. Isn't that gorgeous? Hopefully I don't get too bit up, and hopefully this video isn't too shaky. Oh, there's a little bee crawling on my hand. Oh, he's tickling me. So fucking cute. I love bees. I was sitting under a tree thinking about my ex and wishing that he was there with me because I miss the love, I miss the touch, the company. And then of course there's like the whole added aspect of, maybe an attachment issue. But, even when I hang out with my siblings, that kind of craving gets satisfied in those moments. And I was thinking, I was like, is this bad? Is this good? Like, what is this? And as I'm sitting here by the creek, I'm realizing I think that this desire in a lot of people just to have another person around or to have love from someone else is an innately human and natural thing, which helps me kind of like accept the feeling. I was sitting there and I was thinking maybe not having that right now is simply, I want it and maybe I don't need it, and it is a sacrifice I'm making so that I can better myself in other ways. But sometimes this sort of guilt or shame creeps in where I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be like this, or, maybe I'm not loving myself the right way or focusing enough on X, Y, or Z that's creating this kind of desire to have another person. And like I said, I think it's an innately human response because we are, and it's a little difficult to remember this, but if you think back to like all of human history, we operate within the community. We thrive within the community. There's very little comparatively that we can accomplish on our own that is not better supported by the community. When you think pre-agricultural hunter-gatherer times, like the community protects you, it helps you accrue resources, it helps you lift and build things that you wouldn't be able to maybe build on yourself, into this kind of mutilated way that the community has now become, and this culture has become heavily individualized because it's easier to profit off of the individual than the community, because as a community you're stronger, and like I said, like that benefited us as a species, and I think that's what drives this craving to be loved and supported and in community with others. So I just kind of am coming to that acceptance that like this craving isn't like bad, but maybe it is something that I can give up for right now to pursue these other goals. And I realized while I was sitting there by myself under the tree, we are isolated from ourselves. There is such a heavy culture around numbing and distraction that we as individuals very rarely spend alone time. Usually alone time is spent with a device, with a book, with a pet, with a family member, with a partner. Very rarely is it just us and our surroundings and nothing else, literally nothing else. And I'm not saying like don't journal for your alone time or don't read or indulge in the things that you like. But when I think about how much time I truly spend alone, and kind of had this moment of clarity or maybe not clarity, but this moment of consciousness perhaps, where I'm looking down at my shoulder and I'm looking at the acne on my shoulder, and I'm just kind of like appreciating it for how it is. And I'm like, wow, maybe a path through, or the quickest path through to a deeper cultivation of self-love is true alone time. True alone time. For me, nature's great. It's great because you don't really feel alone sometimes when you're in nature. There's so much to look at and observe, and it's so relaxing. But ultimately, it is kind of a very personal experience, and there's no distraction in the way. It's pure presence, and you are there with yourself and your surroundings and nothing else. And I was like just kind of shocked and reflecting, like on how much time, especially when I'm in the house. Very rarely when I'm in my house am I not doing something or distracting myself or on a screen or engage in some sort of activity. So maybe for me personally, more nature time is a way to be intentional about that, because it is so boring to be bored in the house. Like, there's not really much to look at. But I do think that boredom that I had as a child growing up in my house is what did cultivate a sort of enjoyment. I use the word cultivate a lot because I'm a farmer. Create a sort of enjoyment in creativity and being alone and an imagination and like a self-confidence. Like, I have so many memories of just sitting on the carpet, feet up the wall, like just going in thought loops, like not doing anything. And I think boredom is something that we have been stripped of because there's such a heavy marketization for distraction, because it's not pleasurable. It's easy to say like, oh, like let's just pursue the pleasure, let's just do what feels good. But I think it's a lot of times done unconsciously, where maybe we or I haven't realized that, like, I think I maybe mentioned this in a previous video. It's like, through trying to cure the boredom, I'm not realizing what maybe I really need. Maybe I really just need quiet time and alone time. Maybe I need a nap or some food. And in kind of engaging in this dopamine-rich activity that doesn't actually nourish anything and is to a T unreal. I'll make a whole nother video about how like engaging in screens and entertainment is filling your life with non-experiences. So when I'm numbing in that way, like, I'm not living. I'm numbing and pacifying and whatever. And when I think back, and I try not to be too perfectionistic or purist in my ideals, but when I think back to like communities that existed pre maybe radio, I imagine that they probably had a lot more alone time because you don't have those distractions. It's just not accessible. Like, you had your hobbies and you had your job and you had your family. And I'm not saying that distractions and numbing didn't exist. Alcohol has been around forever. Drugs have been around forever in any form, you know. And of course, there's like the downside to it of being like overly isolated or overly alone, or being like self-deprivating and like depriving yourself of little bits of joy and pleasure, even if it maybe doesn't fit into like this perfectionistic model that I personally like struggle with in my head of like what life should be like, because it's very difficult for me to look back on the way things were and not be like, oh my god, I would like so much rather like live in like a pre-agriculture hunter-gatherer society where, you know, XYZ. But that's just not a helpful thought train at all. I think that pretty much sums up everything I was thinking about being isolated from ourselves. Like, truly isolated from ourselves. Like, so many of us, and I have this personal experience, don't really know who I was, who we are. Or maybe try to understand ourselves through commodities, through relationships, through our job, our academics, and identify with these characteristics or personality traits as a replacement to being alone. Like, just chilling out by yourself and like seeing what comes up. It's funny because I think when we are doing that, like, we are so much more similar than we realize. Like, I think we are all, as humans, operating on this frequency that is just like the human frequency and like the universal frequency. And then when society and culture and all the good and bad things that come into that, I mean, you can't really say that people aren't profiting off of us being divided. It's pretty obvious. You can't say that we aren't being profited off of by being marketed to and put in boxes. And it's just so funny because it still all operates within the context of the whole. There's just like such a heavy push on like self this and self that, but it's like we still operate within the context of the whole. So I guess I've just been thinking about that, the individual perspective versus the community perspective, and like how so much of the individual can't really be contextualized at all without the community. But I do think alone time is, in a sense, imperative. And I think that's something that our parents and our parents' parents, this might be assumption, had a lot more of than kids today have because of iPads and technology and things like that. Oh my God, is that someone on a boat? No, it's just someone out skipping rocks. I was gonna be like, that's so cool. Yeah, that's it.